Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and just before we begin here, the reason why I'm late in getting started is because last minute my microphone just doesn't seem to want to work. So I need to get a sound check from anyone watching or everyone watching. If you can hear me all right, I'm coming through on my webcam microphone, not the big microphone. Um, I tried to reboot, it didn't seem to work. I unplugged it, plugged it back in. It just it has power and it has connection, it has everything, but Windows just doesn't want to recognize it. I've run into this problem before. Usually a reboot resets everything, but it didn't in this case, and well, I didn't want to leave it. Um, I didn't want to leave it too long. So the two Benjamins say that they can hear me, and yet the sound is good. So um, we'll work with what we have for today. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. And just serendipitously, given today's topic, a video showed up, and it is, you might say, perfectly suited to illustrate that which I wanted to show you today. And I really do feel it's better to show you and allow your own intuition, your own innermost, to provide you that which you need to discern what is going on, as opposed to me telling you in the abstract, allowing you to observe for yourself and discern based on your own intuition, based on the guidance of your own innermost, that which is taking place, the dynamic. Now, what exactly am I referring to? What dynamic? If you recall from the thumbnail and the description of today's live stream, I've got Tony Robbins on there. I've got David Bayer. Both of these are well-known motivational speakers and so-called self-help gurus. And they have run seminars, live seminars, and webinars, and workshops and retreats for, at this point, millions of people. Certainly Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins has been doing this since the 80s. I know because I was just a kid when infomercials first became a thing on television. And one of the infomercials that I distinctly remember was Tony Robbins and his famous or infamous personal power program. He wrote this book, and he was selling his course, his program, his home study course that's a companion to the book. And it came on, I don't know, whatever it was, 12 cassettes or whatever it was, whatever the number was. And it included workbooks and a copy of his book and so on and so forth. And that was the first time that I had ever been exposed to the so-called self-help phenomena, or more aptly put, the self-help industry. Because even then, I remember he was asking, quite a lot of money for this program, for this course. that promised, if not fame and fortune explicitly, it certainly promised to provide the buyer, the client, whatever you want to call the individual forking out the money for the program, the student perhaps, it would provide that individual a roadmap and a process, a formula that if they followed it to a T and if they practiced it and really committed themselves to it, then it would reorient them and reframe and restructure their own thinking and their own emotions, and bring their faculties into alignment with their desires, with their dreams, with their hopes. And this formula has persisted in one flavor or another, certainly since the 1980s. Tony Robbins is now filling stadiums, or at least he was before COVID. He flies around everywhere on a helicopter, apparently, because he's that wealthy now. He's 65 years old. And there are others, including David Baer, who's also on the thumbnail for today's live stream, but many, many, many others. And as I pointed out in the description of today's live stream, these individuals, Tony Robbins and these other individuals, didn't invent this stuff. The first that I had ever heard of some of what they teach came from Dale Carnegie and Buckminster Fuller and Joe Dispenza and others, many others, who were the mentors or the originators, the teachers, the mentors who taught people like Tony Robbins, people like Wayne Dyer, more on the new age side than on the sales side, although Wayne Dyer crossed over both because he, of course, was a psychologist. And I guess he got the nickname Mr. Positive back in the late 60s, early 70s. Why the preamble? Why this background? Because today we have an opportunity to observe one of these self-help gurus in a one-on-one interview situation where he covers a great deal of ground as the interviewer, a fellow by the name of Tom Bilieu, asks him a whole bunch of salient and pointed questions as he himself, as a seeker of truth, as a seeker of every advantage he can get, tries to unearth the hidden secrets and the keys to success that his guest used in order to attain his wealth and his success and his prominence with his students. And Tom Bilieu's guest is John Assaraf. And what I would like to do over the course of today's live stream is play this interview for you. And I will pause the interview at key moments for us to be able to reflect and discuss on what is being said and what is being shared, and whether or not you are able to discern what is going on, what is happening. So without further ado, I'd like to get started on that process. And at any point you hear something that seems important to you, that is striking, that is, hey, wait a minute, that right there, that we need to discuss that, or we need to, I need to point that out, or that's telling, or whatever. If there's something that jumps out at you, that this moment is important, or what he just said was important, or revealing, salient, whatever it is, feel free to put in capital letters in the chat, pause, or however, get my attention to pause the video, and I will do so. And feel free to share what it is your gut is telling you, or your intuition, the still soft voice is telling you about what you are watching, and about why it's problematic, or why it's revealing, or what is it revealing, why is it a red flag. I certainly want you to be able to participate in this process, because I will be pausing the video at certain points when red flags come up, in order for me to share what I am being directed to share, and the red flags that are coming up for me, and why I think it's a red flag, and why I think we need to discuss it. We need to focus on what he just said, or this part of the conversation. And the reason is, it is important for us to be able to see. It is important for me to be able to show you, give you an opportunity to discover, to participate in that process of discovery with your own innermost, as opposed to, again, me in the abstract talking about this topic and generalizing about what New Age and self-help gurus are like, and what they do and what they say, and so on and so forth. Because you can say to yourself, well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. Or you can witness it for yourself. Then it's not a case of secondhand information. You will hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And Tom Bilyeu, his channel is called Impact Theory. He's all about personal success and personal performance. That's his brand. He's a multimillionaire, if not billionaire, and he's started many companies. He's what they call a serial entrepreneur, and so he's bringing on someone who, for him, he's a bit of a hero, or not, someone to be admired. And I think you'll get that impression. Oh, Azazel says, agree, almost sounds like you're speaking in a tin can. Well, that's because I'm speaking into my webcam's microphone. As I was saying, for whatever reason, my big microphone is not being detected by Windows. So, and it is a Windows issue. So I'm afraid this is just what we're going to have to deal with for now, because it would take too long for me to reboot the computer, and there's no guarantee that the microphone is going to work. So let's just go with what we're going with, and we'll see how it goes. If it's unbearable for you guys, then I'll see, perhaps there's something I can do about it. So without further ado, this video, I'm not going to be playing it directly off of YouTube, because that's posing a whole series of other challenges these days. But what I will do is show you the so you can get the title. So here, let me make that bigger. So let's just do it like this. So you can see the title down here. I'll put that in the chat. And there it is on screen. Well, you can see it on screen anyway. It might be a little bit small, but there it is. Train your brain to become limitless and achieve any goal you have. John Assaraf. And the link, the direct link to the video, is now also in the chat. And now it's also on screen. But what I have done is I've downloaded this to the computer, because this way my computer doesn't have to deal with the extra work of streaming it to you through my computer. It's complicated, and I wonder if even the attempt to do this is what's wreaking havoc with my microphone. But regardless, that's the video. That's its origin. And you know, if you have to bow out any moment, you know that this is being recorded, and you can always come back and watch this later. Or for your reference, you can always go and watch this interview on your own time. And so Lisa says, testing if my comment is going through. Test, test, hee hee. She says, okay, working. All right, so we have everybody going through technical, trying to get their ducks in a row, their technical ducks in a row. So I'm going to close up YouTube again, and let's get going. So I have the sound on, so you should be able to hear it. If you can't hear the video, by all means, let me know right away, and then hopefully we will sort out all the technical gremlins as soon as possible. So I'm just going to let Tom introduce his guest.
Hey everybody, welcome to Impact Theory. Our goal with this show and company is to introduce you to the people and ideas that will help you actually execute on your dreams. All right, today's guest is a wildly successful serial entrepreneur who has built 5 multi-million-dollar companies, including one that generated over $4 billion in revenue. He's also the multiple-time New York Times best-selling author of The Answer and Having It All, and he is widely considered one of the leading behavioral and mindset experts in the world. And part of what makes him so extraordinary is that he has had a just crazy string of successes in multiple industries across absurdly divergent product lines. His areas of expertise range all the way from real estate and internet software to brain research and business consulting. This broad spectrum acumen has seen him featured in 8 movies, including Quest for Success with Richard Branson and the Dalai Lama, and the global phenomenon The Secret. He is also a much sought-after coach and speaker who's been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and on CNN. And additionally, he's been interviewed and mined for his priceless insights by such high-profile interviewers as Larry King, Ellen, and Anderson Cooper. He's not one to sit back on his laurels and retire, however, so despite the kind of repeated success that eludes all but even the most diehard entrepreneurs, he's launched yet another new company, this one called NeuroGym, that aims to use the most advanced technologies and evidence-based brain training methods to help people unleash their fullest potential. So please, help me in welcoming the man whose latest book, Inner Size, is poised to unlock your brain's hidden power, the brain whisperer himself, John Assaraf.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's good to have you on.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
Dude, I want to dive.
How is the sound for everybody? Is it okay? No, Lisa says that she's getting an echo. I don't know why that is. I muted my microphone. She goes, there, good sound. Now it's clear. Let's continue. Let me know, like, thumbs up or thumbs down. I'm going to mute my microphone again, and then we'll try again.
Right into the brain training. So it makes total sense to me now as an entrepreneur why you would be so into like brain research and brain science and all that. But I don't know that it's the most self-evident thing to the outside world. Why did you start there?
Well, I didn't start there. What happened for me personally when I was a teen, between the age of 13 to 17, I got into an enormous amount of trouble with the law. I did a lot of unethical things, and I was getting myself into so much trouble. And I had one mentor that my brother introduced me to. His name was Alan Brown. He was a very successful philanthropist, entrepreneur, and he agreed to meet with me for lunch one day. And he asked me, like, why are you doing these things? You seem like a nice young kid. And I said, I don't know. I just want to make some money and I just want to fit in. He goes, but you seem like you're intelligent. Why don't you just use your brain's natural abilities? I go, well, listen, based on my education and based on what the teachers have told me, I'm not going to do very well in life. And I left high school in grade 11 thinking that I'm not worthy enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. And this one man in 1 minute, in one meeting, changed my life. Because he asked me, what goals do you have? And I said, what do you mean, what goals do I have? I said, I want to go out this weekend to the bar. I want to have some good food. I want to find a nice young lady to maybe hook up with. And he says, no, but what are your bigger goals? And I didn't have any. So he actually sent me home. And he said, fill out these pieces of paper. And on the piece of paper, it said, like, what age do you want to retire by? Like, I was 19. This was May of 1980. I wasn't even started yet. I said, but just fill out these papers. So I said, I want to retire by the time I'm 45 with $3 million. I want to have a Mercedes. I want to have a house. I want to travel the world. I want to have a great lifestyle. And so I came back on Monday and he looked at it and he asked me one question. And that question transformed my life. And he said, are you interested in achieving these goals or are you committed? And I stopped and I looked at him. He was standing up. I was sitting at my desk there at his office. And I asked him, Mr. Brown, I said, what's the difference? And he said, if you're interested, you'll do what's convenient. You'll come up with stories and excuses and reasons why you can't. And you'll use your education as an excuse. You'll use your story as an excuse. You'll use the fact your father was a cab driver and was a gambler and never had any money. You'll use all of that as your reasons why you can't. He says, but if you're committed, you will do whatever it takes. You'll let go of your stories. You'll let go of your excuses. You'll let go of all the reasons you currently have that are formulating your identity of yourself. And you'll learn how to let that go and become who you are destined to become.
Why'd you listen to him? Like, that's such...
All right. So let's pause there just for a moment. Does anybody recognize anything or Any red flags coming up for anybody, or anyone notice anything about his description of how he got started and why? Because what immediately reveals itself to me is that his mentor was pointing out to him all of his conditioning, all of the mental and emotional, psychological conditioning that he had underwent through his childhood, through his education, that had given him all of these beliefs about himself, what he is capable of, and more importantly, what he is incapable of. Benjamin says, it sounds generic as hell. Well, that's because it's a very common experience, isn't it? It's a generic experience. We all have an upbringing. We all go to school. We all have some kind of an education, and we all have undergone some form of conditioning that's psychological and mechanical, especially as children. Our upbringing, so-called traumas that we went through, in other words, events in our life that left their mark on us, and were the fertile ground for beliefs to crystallize within our own psyche about the nature of life, the meaning of life. And those beliefs conditionally and subjectively mark us and affect all of our relationships, all of our decision-making processes, our actions, and in particular, our inactions, as he was pointing out. But this individual showed up and had him observe all of that, take stock of all of that. But he made him go one step further. He gave him this assignment to write out, make a laundry list of everything that he wanted out of life. And he did so. And then he poses the question to him, are you just interested in these things, or are you willing to commit yourself to them? Are you willing to commit yourself? How serious are you about these desires of yours, these goals? Lisa says self-belief systems. She says false, that is false self-belief systems, or false beliefs. It's synonymous, right? And she goes, these manifest as insecurities, etc. Well, yeah, there's a good deal of that, and we will be getting to later in the video. This will come up. The topic of fear will come up, and they will discuss it in a very direct and salient way, and we will of course jump in, and we will have our discussion around that when we get to it. So I just wanted to point out that he began with a series of negative or restrictive, self-defeating beliefs, and this mentor had him write down and commit to a series of desires and a restructured, reorganized belief system around the achievement, the attainment of those desires. So Tom follows up here by saying, you were just a young kid, you're just a young punk. Why would you follow this advice? What made you take this advice? So let's pick up the interview from there.
Such extraordinary advice, which I would have promptly ignored.
Well, I had been in so many situations where I was so embarrassed and ashamed for myself and for my mother and father. And here was a man who was kind, generous, caring, empathetic. He didn't talk down to me. He lifted me up. But then he also said, I can show you how. If you are committed, I can show you how. And I had nothing to lose at that point.
Talk to me about that shame. That's really interesting. And you've talked about growing into being able to talk about stuff very openly. So what was the source of the shame? How did it play out for you?
So the first source of shame, when I was 5, I moved from Israel, where I was born, to Montreal. And I had just started kindergarten in Israel. And then I was thrown into a class with 50 kids in Montreal in grade 1. I didn't speak English or French. And so I felt stupid. I felt like I sat there, looking up at the ceilings, bugging the other kids, and was consistently reprimanded, consistently put in the principal's office. And then I was consistently, brought, to my knees with my parents. My father was physically abusive, which, is a challenge in itself, because words weren't a way, that he communicated. Hands and feet were his way of communicating. And so when I did the wrong things, that was the punishment. And so I felt embarrassed that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't going to amount to much. And back then, school was, my parents were trying to say, go to school, do well. That's your way out of, where we were living. That's your way out of this life that we're having, which wasn't a bad life. We had food on the table. We had a roof over our heads, but there was always a struggle. And Mr. Brown offered me some hope. It really amounted to that. He offered me gentle, kind love and hope without embarrassing me, shaming me, or making me feel guilty.
What was it that he said that read to you as hope at that point?
It was his demeanor of how kind he was. He was extremely successful. Real estate offices, real estate buildings, a wife, Lori, children, just kindness, just raw kindness. There was nothing for him to gain from helping me. He didn't know me, but he just was kind. And it was one of the first times that there wasn't a hidden agenda or somebody just, putting me down for being a degrading human being or degraded human being. And he made me promise that if I took what he taught me, I'd teach it to others.
I dig that. You've become this really extraordinary example of rewriting your story.
Yeah.
How did you get out from under the story that you would have had to have been forming if your father was abusive? Because now I know that you guys, you're in very regular communication.
Oh yeah.
So
I just turned 88 and
it's amazing. So at some point,
I forgave him 50 years ago.
What did that process look like? I know a lot of people are watching.
Okay, we just want to jump in here before they get into the part about forgiveness. Does anyone see or feel, sense, intuit this transformation that he's describing as a young person with his mentor, Mr. Brown? And Tom asks him the question, why did you follow this advice? It's really good advice, Tom says, from his point of view. It's really good advice, but what made you follow it? Because it's hard advice to follow. And his answer is, well, because Mr. Brown was so kind. His demeanor his approach. He didn't shame me. He didn't talk down to me. It was full of love. It was full of kindness. There was no hidden agenda. It was the opposite of the shame and violence, the abuse, the guilt trips, and the conditioning that he had received throughout his childhood and his upbringing that led to all of his beliefs that he wasn't good enough and that he wasn't deserving. Someone comes along who offers the opposite of that. Someone comes along who boosts his self-esteem. Someone comes along with no agenda, doesn't want anything from him, except one thing, and that is, if you take my advice and you succeed following my advice, you just have to promise me one thing, that you'll pay it forward, that you'll spread it, that you'll teach it to others. And so he's so touched, he's so moved by even the memory of that, and the fact that he's committed his life to that he has fulfilled his end of the bargain, and that the advice that he received transformed him and his life into this cornucopia of wealth and success that he has enjoyed, and that he has taken it upon himself to live up to his end of that bargain and pay it forward and share it with others and teach others. But how many times have you heard me say that shame is the flip side of pride? The ego of pride doesn't care if we love ourselves too much or if we hate ourselves. Pride doesn't care. Just as long as we are self-centered and focused on ourselves, about all that we are incapable of doing or all that we are capable of doing. And all it took to nudge him from self-loathing, from self-doubt, from self-sabotaging conditioned beliefs. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'll never amount to anything. The only thing I'm good at is being a punching bag for my dad. To, I am worthy. I do deserve these things. And I am lovable because here's Mr. Brown, and he is showing me this love, this charming man, this intelligent, successful individual who has nothing to gain by helping me and doesn't want anything in return, only that I promise to help others. But Lisa says here, yeah, it's somebody believing in him and helping him believe in himself. Whereas before, his conditioned beliefs was disbelief, because the people around him and his upbringing, his environment, was so difficult and so clearly showing him, telling him that he shouldn't believe in himself because nobody else around him believed in himself. Now replace that with a loving, charming, giving, selfless mentor who has all this success that you cannot deny shows up and says, no, 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 no. What is it that you want? What is it that you really want? Write it out, write it down. Now, how badly do you want that? How committed are you to going and get that for yourself? Because I believe you can do it. I believe in you, just as Lisa is pointing out here. And that belief comes packaged in love. That's a kind of love that he didn't get that kind of love from his parents and from his teachers. And so the newness of it all and the difference of it all and everything else very easily was transformed into, okay, I'm going to start believing in myself then. If this guy can believe in me, then I can start believing in me. That I'm worthy, that I'm capable, and so on and so forth. Whereas up until now, I believe the opposite. But the belief, I'm worthy and I'm deserving, is just the opposite side of the coin of I'm unworthy and I'm undeserving. Because one side of that coin is shame, and the other side of that coin is pride. This is important to note and recognize. And you might argue that, well, we all have to start somewhere. And sure, that might be true. But let's keep going, and because we're going to come back to this point time and again. But this is the first real indication, the first hint on his path that something is awry with this whole story. Okay.
In this right now, they are stuck in a story, man. Like something happened to them as kids or whatever's happening to them now. They don't know how to get out from under that story and could never conceive of having a beautiful relationship, you know, that they've re-explored and reimagined.
Yeah. When I was in my 20s, one of the things that Alan put me on a path to was personal development. You know, read a book a month, go to events, listen to cassette tapes back then of motivational stuff for motivation, for inspiration, for strategies, for tactics of what to do to raise your level of skill and knowledge. So I went to this event and I brought up this challenge that I had with my father. And the instructor said, like, when are you going to forgive him? I said, never. I'm never going to forgive him. Fuck that, forgive him. There's so much pain. And the instructor said, well, if you're never going to forgive him, then you're the one taking the poison pill, hoping he's going to die or he's going to be affected. He says, you don't forgive him for him. You forgive him so you can move on. I was like, aha, number one. And then he said, why don't you ask your father why he did it?
Whoa.
Like, why was he like that? And so when I mustered up enough courage on the phone with my father, I said, Dad, like, how come you've never said, I love you? He says, well, my father never said he loved me. That's not what a man says. But you say to my sister, says, well, that's okay to say to a girl or to a woman. I said, why did you hit me so much? Why did you? He says, because you were being a bad boy. I said, but why didn't you talk to me? Like, why didn't you just talk? And he says, well, because my father hit me too. I had to put you in your place. I had to teach you the right way to stop the behavior. And it was at that moment that I realized he just didn't know better. That's what he learned, was the process to try and help me. So he's not a malicious human being. He's a kind, loving, caring man. But he was taught to get compliance hit, so the pain will cause you not to do it again. And in theory, okay, understanding the brain science today, it does work in some cases, But especially with children, even adults, the physical and mental and emotional trauma that's created when somebody who loves you also inflicts so much pain to you, there's confusion. The neural network in the brain says, I love this person, my mother, my father, my best friend, whatever. And then there's so much pain associated. Now we have these patterns in our brains of this love and fucking hate, love and pain. And it's very, very confusing. But after this dialogue with him, I started telling him, I love you. And it took 3 years. I used to call him every week.
Whoa.
I started telling him, I love you, Dad. Hang up. I love you, Dad. Hang up. I love you, Dad. Hang up. Then one day he says to me, I love you too, boy.
Wow.
And then he has never not said, I love you to me, my brother, or my sister since then.
Wow. That's really extraordinary.
Yeah.
What was the mechanism? You're so good at like getting to the just raw how I pull this off. I know you use vision boards, which I definitely want to talk about.
So they're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. They're going to start getting into some of the tactics and nuts and bolts and tools. But here we see the importance of being loved or feeling loved and having that love expressed in the way that he wants it to be expressed. Now you can argue, you can agree with his points about the brain and the confusion that comes when someone who's supposed to love you or really is acting from a place of love is applying way too much tough love. Hitting children, for example, being hit by his father, the physical abuse that's causing all this trauma and causing all this confusion in the brain. This person who's brought me into the world, this person who's supposed to be looking after me and raising me and teaching me how to be a man, why is he beating me up? And so he recounts the story. Well, that's all his father knew. That's how his father was raised. So it's a generational passing of the conditioning to the next generation. And this is very common in a lot of households and a lot of families. But when he finally confronts his father about it, he only learns this when he confronts his father about it. And it really is, again, because he is an empiricist and he's a mentalist, he's coming at it from the point of view of the brain, the physical brain, from a human 2.0 perspective. It's a binary question, right? Love for him is what he received from Alan Brown, his mentor, not from his father, the one who beat him up. And so he calls his father on it. And he asks and he challenges his father on the way that he was raising him and the way he was raised. And after 3 years of saying, love you, Dad, love you, Dad, love you, Dad, finally his father gives in, capitulates, and responds and says, I love you too, boy. And even Tom Beaulieu looks at this and says, wow, that's an incredible transformation. Or is it simply somebody making a shift and recognizing that love is severity and mercy? Whereas he was raised only that love is tough love. And that if you love someone, your child, you have to whip them into shape. You can't coddle them. You can't indulge them. If they're bad, you've got to let them know that they're being bad. You have to discipline the naughtiness, the badness out of them. That's taking the law of severity, one half of the two pillars of the tree of life. It's taking it too far, especially if one only does that. We have to be balanced. We have to have both aspects of love, severity and mercy. There's a time for severity, but there's also a time for mercy. Even our legal system recognizes that you can't always just bring down the hammer on people all the time. We have to create a space between the two pillars. And that's what you can see behind me. But it's not this either or issue. And what you see being expressed between these two gentlemen is this belief that it's an either or issue, that love is mercy, love is compassion, love is kindness. That's all it is. And this other thing, this severity, that's child abuse, that causes trauma. Well, sure, when you take it too far, but they're not talking about taking it too far. They're talking about it's just wrong. Because that's the binary duality of the mind. It's like before. Either you loathe yourself, you hate yourself, you don't believe in yourself, or you flip a switch, you flip the narrative, and now you love yourself and you believe in yourself. And you think of yourself deserving and capable. But it's the same underlying phenomenon. It's just the other side. So this I'm pointing this out because this is going to be an ongoing theme and through line as we continue the So Lisa says, first of all, she says, Frederick did that for me. And she says, love is seen as weakness. She continues here, she says, which is also a false belief system from his dad's standpoint. Teaching this to his son as well. She says, love is never a weakness. Just want to highlight that. Also, it has nothing to do with intellect. But of course, these gentlemen are intellectuals and they're materialists and empiricists. So they're going to bring everything back to the brain and the structures of the brain and the neurotransmitters and the neurochemistry and so on and so forth. And you'll see that that's going to be an ongoing theme as they continue their conversation. But speaking of which, let's just let them continue. I'm going to just take a quick break during this segment. So you guys just watch away, and I'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Accomplished boards, which I think is really extraordinary, and I'd never heard that before, and I think that's really, really awesome.
Crap
Was
board
this
too.
What board?
Crap.
Crap board.
Get to the crap board.
All right, well, we definitely have to hear about that. Were you using the crap board to like reframe the story? Like, how did that work?
The crap board didn't come until the last couple of years. Let me come back to the Alan Brown story. When I came back that following couple of days with my goals, and he asked me committed or interested, I said I'm committed, shook my hand. He then put me through real estate school for 5 weeks. I graduated from real estate school May 20th, 1980. And the only reason those dates are ingrained in my brain, I passed the real estate test on my own without cheating.
Wow.
So that was step one. When I came back to the office, he had the forms that I'd filled out. He says, great, sit down. So I want you to read every one of them every morning that you come in the office at 7:30, and I want you to run your fingers across them.
Were these the goals or the beliefs?
Those are the goals that I had. So he had me write my vision for health, wealth, relationships, career, business, finances, charity, fun, experiences, everything, every area of my life. He had these documents. He said, I want you to read them every day. And you're going to do it while you come into the office so that I know that you've done them. And I want you to run your fingers across them as you're reading them. And then when you're finished one paragraph, close your eyes. And I want you to feel, what would it be like if that was true? Mm. So he got me to see it, to touch it, to close my eyes and visualize it and to feel it. So at the time, he didn't understand what he was really doing, but he was causing me to create new neural patterns in my brain that did not exist before. The only success that I'd ever really seen was on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And I said, one day, I want a life like that. And so every single day for a year, I had to do that. And it only took 10 or 15 minutes. And there was also beliefs. You talked about what else was in there. He also asked me to write down, what would you have to believe about yourself in order to achieve those goals? I said, well, I'd have to believe I'm smart enough, but I don't. He goes, I don't want to know what you don't. He says, what would you have to believe? Well, I have to believe I'm smart enough. I'd have to believe I'm deserving enough. I'd have to believe I'm worthy enough. I'd have to believe I'm capable of doing this. I'd have to believe these things. I wrote out a bunch of things, and he added a few more. He says, great. Now I want you to record those things. And on your way to work and on your drive to look at real estate homes, because it's 19 getting into real estate, you listen to those over and over and over and over and over again until you can recite every single one of them. So he taught me the power of repetition. He taught me the power of looking at stuff, touching stuff, feeling stuff, seeing stuff, hearing stuff, memorizing stuff. And at the time I was 19, I said, I felt this was fucking ludicrous to me, right? This is like, what the hell am I doing here? It was nuts. But that first year at 19, I made like $30,000, which was $5,000 more than my dad made as a cab driver. So I said, something's working. And I just kept doing it. I was too afraid not to. So I kept doing it. In the second year, I made $151,000.
Whoa.
5 times. Now, in the second year, he started upgrading my knowledge and skills more. So he started to say, okay, instead of doing this now you've graduated to doing this. And he taught me some upgraded skills. And so the combination of training my brain at a young age with beliefs that I wanted to have, he taught me the right habits to have, daily rituals, for goal achievement versus goal setting.
That's interesting.
Right? So he said, everybody sets goals. Either they write them down or they don't. They have them in their head. I'm going to teach you how to achieve goals.
It's really interesting coming from the guy that was in The Secret. And
okay, so here we see the first rudimentary application of the so-called science of accomplishment, of achievement. And this was, of course, very common and is still to this day very common. That's why he's bringing it up. This advice that you find in the New Age and in the self-help industries, where you find the phenomenon of affirmations and the repetition of affirmations. And you heard it right from him, his belief that what's happening here is that the repetition of these beliefs, these statements, are ingraining in his brain a new belief system. It's a reconditioning. It's a mental reconditioning, or a reprogramming from his point of view of the brain. But other gurus in the New Age and in the self-help will say, well, you're reprogramming your mind. It depends on how materialistic and how empirical the guru is, and how heavily he leans on neuroplasticity and modern neuroscience. Because of course, 40 years ago, when Tony Robbins was doing this and Wayne Dyer was doing this, we didn't have the kind of brain scanning, brain imaging capabilities that we do today. And neuroscience, the concept of neuroplasticity, I didn't even hear that word or know it was a phenomenon until I was at least in university. So that was or after university. So it was at least 25 years ago, give or take. Maybe a little bit prior to that, because 25 years ago now, that's the turn of the millennium. So maybe neuroplasticity, I might have heard of it earlier during, 25, 30 years ago. But still, Tony Robbins has been around doing this for 40 years, and Wayne Dyer was started in the 60s. And so terms like neuroplasticity just didn't exist. And neuroscience, psychiatrists and psychologists, they were still doing psychotherapy. They had not switched into the completely empiricist, materialist world of psychopharmacology, which is what most so-called mental health these days exists. You go into your mental health professional for depression or for anxiety or with whatever problems you have, and the first thing they do is they reach for a prescription pad and they write you a prescription for a drug. This didn't used to be the case. And so when the self-help industry really took off in the 70s, 80s, and until today, they began just talking about the mind and your psychology. However, the affirmations, the process, the repetition, and not only that, he's going to get into in a moment the tapes, the subliminal tapes that you play while you're sleeping. And he'll explain why that was, or why his belief in that was. But coming at this from the point of view of an empiricist, of a materialist, he says if your brain is programmed a certain way to have all of these negative or all of these self-defeating beliefs, well, then the answer is to forcefully reprogram that brain to have the positive beliefs and the beliefs that prop you up, beliefs that are aligned with and that support the outcomes that you desire, the success, the fortune, the happiness, and so on and so forth. But we're still talking about on the level of programming in the mind, whether you equate the mind to the brain or not. We're still, all of this discussion is still from the point of view of a self, of a personality, and the mind. Lisa says, I like to clear my mind before bed. 0, set it if you will. Yeah, so you won't hear any talk of clearing the mind here. Even if they talk about, at some point, if they bring up meditation or something like that, no, what was clear here is the practice of visualization and the investment of emotional energy into the visualization. In other words, what in the New Age they refer to as manifestation. The self-help gurus, obviously, they massage this and they adapt it, especially here, into an empirical, brain-related, scientific orientation, where you're reprogramming your brain, you're reprogramming your beliefs. And that your brain, consciously and subconsciously, your behavior, in other words, will be affected by the conscious and subconscious reprogramming of the brain. Lisa says, yeah, meditation, but I like to meditate in the morning and in midday, not before bed. And she follows up and she says, understanding. Okay, let's continue.
I love what you've talked about, the difference between the law of attraction and the law of Goya.
Oh, yeah.
So talk to us about that.
So the law of Goya is simply get off your ass. So if you think and you believe and you emotionalize, you visualize, and you create your plan for how am I actually going to achieve this? So what do I need to do? When am I going to do it? How specifically? How am I going to tweak it, measure it, and iterate it so that I'm consistently making progress? I learned the value of progress versus perfection. None of my mentors ever had me focus on perfection. They had me focus on progress to just keep getting better. Little incremental gains every day, every week, every month, every quarter. And even when you move backwards a couple of steps, what's the progress that you made and what you learned? So I was taught that failure is an opportunity to learn. And I was also taught to disassociate me being a failure from failing.
For sure.
Right?
I want to go back to what you're talking about with beliefs.
Yeah.
You have to just pause it for a moment right there. Does anyone recognize what he was describing there about setbacks and failure, and that his mentor had him focus on progress? But even if you have setbacks and failure, the importance is what you learned in the setback, what you learned because of the failure. And then he mentions the disassociation between the act of failing and the identification or attachment to the automatic and perfectly natural mechanical reaction to failing, which is, I'm a failure. And he points out that his mentor taught him the importance of not identifying and attaching oneself to one's failure, because that results in this belief, this mental programming, I am a failure, I am a failure. Here, look, I failed again. But that 2 steps forward, 1 step back process, if you've been around for a while on this channel, we have a name for that. We call it the Alm of Life, the analogous ultimate methodology. This spiral, right? Where as you go through the process of revolutions in your life to expand the spiral, to grow and have the upper levels get higher and higher and higher on a spiral to ascend to the next level, there is no other way to do that but descend to the next lower level. Ascension and descension on the Alm of Life. And what that means is going on this oscillation on what in the Bible they call Jacob's ladder. As you go higher and higher towards heaven, you have no choice but to go deeper and deeper into hell and face your demons there. How do you face your demons? Failure, suffering. That's how you face your demons, because it's our demons that make us fall. It's our demons that cause us to fail. And why and how that is not revealed in the interview. It's one of the things that the New Age gurus and the self-help gurus won't tell you, either because they don't know or because they don't want the conversation to go there. But we will take it there. And that's because your demons constitute the false self, who is the adversary. The adversary of whom? The adversary of your true self. But here, there is no talk of false self and true self. There is only one self and negative self-sabotaging beliefs and positive self-supporting, self-aggrandizing beliefs that are aligned with desires. And that if you experience failures, don't identify, don't attach. You got to be kind to yourself, right? Just like his mentor was kind to him. It's always kindness and compassion. And say, okay, what can I learn from my mistakes, and just move on. Without the recognition that if I don't get to the bottom of what caused the failure in the first place, then I'm going to be on this perpetual loop of having to face similar failures or similar circumstances over and over and over again, because the cause of that failure hasn't been addressed. But it's just important to note here that the Alm of Life, although it's obviously he doesn't call it that, but the recognition that, you know, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Anybody who has achieved any success in life, in anything, in any field, has had to experience and has had to undergo the analogous ultimate methodology, because there is only one pattern to growth and development. Even the growth and development advocated by the New Age and the self-help gurus. Because if you look at the rings on a tree, or the growth pattern of many other plants, or the spiral pattern of the snails and their shell, it doesn't matter. You see it all through mechanical nature as well. Mechanical nature cannot avoid the analogous ultimate methodology. Things can only grow according to that methodology, that process. Likewise, evolution and devolution, the upward spiral or the downward spiral. It's only a question of how quickly that spiral unfolds. So in a chain reaction, like an explosion or an implosion, the Alm of Life can unfold many, many multiple revolutions very, very, very quickly. Right? And you see that in, you know, hurricanes and tornadoes, and size and scale and speed, right, of the spiral pattern, the upward and downward spiral, the constructive and destructive forces of nature. Well, these are mechanical in nature, but they can only follow the Alm of Life. It's just interesting how an empiricist rationalizes and keeps it all, you know, in the realm of physicality, and in the realm of the brain, and in the realm of the self, because that's one of the important recurring themes that it's important for us to take note of. Lisa says, building structures around himself, try, fail, and then in the end you will get it. And she says, trying and failing is how you learn. Yeah, absolutely. But who is learning? Who is the one who needs to learn? And what is it? What is the lesson? This is very key, because the self-help group will say, well, you learn. and you need to learn. And the lesson that you need to learn, you apply to reach to the next level and the next level. And that's true. But the next level of what? The next level of your goals, of your desires, of attainment, of success. As you define them, as you wrote them down, as you put them on your vision board. We'll get back to that.
And you said, this is so cool. You were talking about how you wrote down these beliefs and you were reading them over and you were doing what you're told and you're running your finger across it. You're really allowing yourself to feel it, imagine it, and your brain was screaming something at you.
My brain was screaming, that's bullshit. That's not true. You're not successful. You're not earning that amount of money. You're not smart. You're not this. But I was also taught at the same time that when that happens, first and foremost, that's normal. That's the old self and the old patterns trying to fight for their life. And he said, with repetition and emotion and consistency, initially it's hard. And you have to use conscious effort to create the new beliefs. He says, but over 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, that new pattern that you're focusing on and paying attention to, your brain basically says, well, I guess you really don't need those old patterns. You keep activating these new ones. Let's just make these ones work and let's make these real. Yeah. But I wanted to understand what happened. And with even the law of attraction, I was taught the law of attraction, I was 23, 24 years old. Also at a real estate conference, they're talking about this law of attraction thing, that there's this energy, everything's made up of energy. I am energy, you are energy. And my thoughts, create this resonance between what I attract and what I don't. I was like, oh, good, I like that shit. Like I want to attract more of the good stuff, right? And so I bought in, I bought into stuff that just made sense to me. But then I was a voracious student. I wanted to understand how. Explain to me how it works. If somebody tells me visualize, I go, why? How does it work? If you ask me to visualize, why does it work? Why should I invest my time on that versus something else? If you're asking me to use affirmations, how specifically, why, how does it work? If you're asking me to emotionalize, well, what's happening in me that tell me I need to create these false senses of feelings? I want to know why it works.
And why does it work, especially emotionalizing? I think that's something that people hear a lot. I talk a lot about embodying something, really feeling it.
Yeah.
But why does it work?
Great question. It has to do with circuits in the brain and neurochemicals that are released. And so when we feel something, chances are that we're going to release dopamine in the brain, the feel-good neurochemical that activates the reward center of the brain. And chances are if we feel that and we have this positive emotion around it, and that neurochemistry is flooding our brain and our body with feel-good chemicals, we're actually activating the motivational center of the brain. And so when we visualize, when we set a goal, when we take an action step, when we emotionalize, when we read our goals, the initial flood of neurochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, feel-good chemicals, and then if we share it with a friend, oxytocin, those three neurochemicals, those are the neurochemicals of goal achievement. But then there's the other side of it, the other circuits of fear, of stress, where norepinephrine, cortisol, or epinephrine, the stress hormones can be released as well. And so I'm fascinated, and I want to teach people the stuff that we've learned about beliefs, self-esteem, self-worth, fears, and the stuff that really holds people back. Because all the how to get healthy and stay healthy, we know. How do I build a business and sustain it? We know. How do I get into a relationship and make it successful? We know. We know most of the how-to for anything that anybody wants to do in this time frame that we live in. So the how-to is the easiest part of the equation. So the harder part of the equation is, why am I not doing the things that I know I should be doing? And why am I not doing the things that I could find out easily how to do?
Let's talk about that. So in your real estate company,
Okay, just to follow up on, if you didn't pick up on, I personally have never heard such a salient rationalization and empirical description of the law of attraction before. Completely focused on the neurochemical causes in the brain that makes it work. And they are going to get into more of the fear and the other side there, but you can see here the levels of rationalization that are taking place to take something that many people have described in many different ways. But the law of attraction, of course, at that foundational level is this energy, and that we are all energy, right? And he even admits that. He also, in this brief segment, referred, and he used the word conscious, that the process of reformulating or reprogramming or reconditioning the mind, the brain, requires conscious effort to do that. So the imbuing the visualizations with the emotionality requires conscious effort. It requires consciousness. It's a conscious investment. All of this is a bit of is a conscious investment. I mean, like any time we perform any kind of exercises, mantralization, chanting, runes, prayer, meditation, we also have to perform that consciously. It's a recognition here that there is a power that is injected that empowers and supercharges any mental activity, any visualization. And that's important here to recognize that here's an empiricist, a materialist, in other words, someone whose beliefs and practices are very much mechanical and informed by mechanicity and the mechanical algorithms of the very mind that he's here to reprogram. And you can see that because of the binary duality of all of the beliefs and the, the flipping the script between self-loathing and self-esteem and flipping between the two pillars of love. Either this way, it's either this or that, and only one of them is love and the other one is hate. Because that's the way the mind thinks. The mind thinks of love and hate. It doesn't think of severity and mercy. Because it's binary. It's the binary duality. It's us or them. It's this and that. And you see this being reflected all the time in everything that he's saying, and everything that he's describing and how he describes it. And he's very clear here, he's very adamant about the law of attraction and the neurochemical soup that it creates within the mind and within the body. And then he also brings up fear, and we're going to continue and get into that. But it's important just to see how often the words like consciousness and so on get slipped into the mix, and law of attraction gets slipped into the mix. But then it returns to this empirical, materialist explanation and understanding. There's a reduction taking place, and everything is being reduced back down to the brain, back down to the self, this self that is the self in self-help. You help yourself. That's a self helping itself. But there's only one self in that equation. That's really important to keep in mind, because that is the one common thread. Even if they talk about the person that you want to be, your future self, your best self. Even the New Age, it talks about your higher self. It's just you ascending to your future higher self. Lisa says, most people are thinking material is the way to manifesting, and that has nothing to do with it. And she also says, who are you? Good, bad, etc. Is that a question you're asking me, or is that just a general question, like a rhetorical question? Let's continue.
You said, I'm giving everyone the same training, they're reading all of the same books, and yet they're not getting the same results. And it wasn't like, oh, well, the smart people are doing better than the dumb people. You said sometimes it was people that you were like, God, in real life, this guy's not that bright, but he's crushing it. So what ended up being the difference between the people who didn't do anything with the information and those that did?
So this is going back sometimes, I think in 1992, we were stuck, but I knew there was more possibility. There was room for growth. And I wanted to figure out if the stuff that I did in the 80s when I was a kid, that broke free, would it work with some of my agents? And so we took 75 agents, randomly. Agents said, hey, do you want to get into a 6-month program to retrain your brain, your subconscious brain, around your beliefs about what is possible for you to achieve, around your habits of what you have to do in order to achieve that. And we focused on retraining their subconscious mind. And so for 6 months, they had to go through a process of listening to certain audio tapes, reading certain materials every day, and following the process of training their brain, specifically their subconscious brain, which controls 95 to 98% of all of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors today. And within 6 months, that group increased sales by $100 million.
Jesus.
$100 million. And I said, holy shit, right? This is working. And so we started to teach. Some of what we teach now in NeuroGym, actually now we have the technologies, we have the systems that are far better than what we did back in the 90s. And we went from 1.2 billion to 4.5 billion a year. And it wasn't because we taught them any more skills to be real estate agents. We taught them how to change the way they thought about themselves. We taught them how to change their habits.
Wow.
Our agents who made $750,000 or more were in front of a client 75% of the time. And we asked all the agents that weren't in front of more clients, why are you doing that? Why aren't you in front of people that are going to help you earn more income? Oh, well, we're busy doing this and doing this and doing this. And they had stories and excuses and reasons why. And so part of the work that I love to do now is really help people understand, what is your story? What's the story you're telling yourself? Because we all have a story. We have a money story, a relationship story, a health story. We have a story for everything. And then that story keeps recreating our lives over and over and over again. And we have beliefs that support the story. We have habits that support the story. We have people that support the story. We have systems that support our story.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for popping in. We'll see you again. It might be worthwhile just to, and Lisa also asked, in general, and she was referring to the higher self, and she says she's got to go. Okay, we'll see you next time, Lisa. But let's pause here anyway, because here he addresses that case study of the subliminal, the subliminal training, the subliminal reprogramming that he did with his sales force in his real estate company. And he described this incredible rise in revenues as a result. And he describes, I guess he put it in his own words, something like 95 to 98% of our behaviors come from the subconscious mind. Well, that's basically an empiricist, a rationalist, a materialist, saying the same thing that Master Samael says when he says that this humanity is 97% ego on average. 97% falls between the 95 and 98 that he just talked about, because the subconscious mind is the ego. It's psychological hell. It's the realm of the Black Lodge. It's the realm of the mechanicity that we are unconscious of, right? It's subconscious. And here he recognizes and admits that if you can reprogram or penetrate or write onto the code in the subconscious mind, well, wow, you can create phenomenal effects on the material plane, on the physical plane, because it's going to affect your behavior, it's going to affect your beliefs, it's going to affect your actions, and that's going to lead to certain results. So if you take the desired results and interpolate them into a series of beliefs, into a series of codes that you then inject into the ego, into the subconscious mind, well, then those egos are going to bubble up and apply that new code in your thoughts, in your reactions, in your emotions, in your behaviors, which will align with those desires that you interpolated and encoded into the subconscious programming. What some gurus describe, and how some of these self-help people, the language that they use, they call this mind hacking. This reprogramming of the mind, consciously and subconsciously, like the conscious beliefs, but also these subconscious, and the repetitions, the affirmations, but now this subliminal training, this subliminal technique. They call this mind hacks. You're hacking your mind. What? Like a hacker hacks into a computer, and depending on the hacker and the reason why they are hacking into that system, into that network, they either want to extract something, or they want to implant something. They want to take some code and integrate it into that computer system, into that network that they're hacking into, so that as that computer and or network goes through its day-to-day functions and day-to-day operations, it will integrate the new code and execute the program, and produce the desired result that the hacker wants. So an example of this would be phishing scams that get you to provide information that allows a hacker to get into your system. And then as you surf the web, the code that they implant on your computer is constantly sending information back to the hacker based on your behavior. So the hacker can skim all sorts of information about you, including all of your personal information, all of your banking information, your social insurance number, and anything else that you type into any website online. All of that can be duplicated and sent to the hacker, and then he uses that, for whatever malintent that he uses it for. Maybe lots of times, maybe he just sells it on the internet. The other option for hacking, of course, is to extract information. And that's what CIA interrogators do. And that's the whole process of breaking someone down, and breaking until their mind breaks. And they'll tell you anything, because they've been put under such duress. Well, that's basically what torture is all about. But they also have, obviously, substances that they can apply. They can use electric shock. They can use, again, substances, and they can also use various forms of physical manipulation, light and sound, to basically make the mind go into a state of where all the defenses break down, and it's like what they do to a phone, a smartphone. If you've heard that expression of rooting your phone is putting your or jailbreaking a phone. If you have an Apple product, they call it jailbreaking. In Android, they call it rooting. And that's like getting to the root of the phone. And jailbreaking sounds exactly what it sounds like. You're breaking the phone out of jail, out of all of the security protocols that Apple puts in place. Why? So you can install stuff that Apple doesn't want you to put on their phone, or you can extract off the phone what Apple doesn't want you to have, or what Google doesn't want you to have. So there's this double process that's going on here where we're talking about hacking the mind, and these self-help gurus will use this terminology, hacking the brain. And that hacking the mind is the first step to hacking your life, because that's really what we're talking about here. To produce the effects that you want to have, to produce the results, to fulfill the desire, you have to get into the system, right? And you have to learn how the system works and manipulate the system at the root cause. And for them, everything is in the brain, everything is in the mind, because those where your beliefs are, and your beliefs lead to your words, lead to your actions, lead to outcomes, right? Even the Buddha said that, or was it Gandhi who said that? Regardless, we know that to be true, but that's the level that these people are working on, right? The hacking of the mind, the hacking of your life. Okay, we'll come back to that word hack in a little later.
And so my question I always ask people, who would you be with a different story?
Talk to me about set points. That was something really interesting in what you talk about around the stories and things that we carry that I found really interesting.
Sure. So Maxwell Maltz wrote a great book many, many years ago probably the 70s called Psycho-Cybernetics, right? And Maxwell Maltz was a surgeon who performed surgery on people. And what he noticed is even after plastic surgery that he performed on people, some people didn't see any change in their faces. And it was visible to everybody else, but not to them.
Because they had a map of what they thought they looked like?
Yes. Okay. So we all have a map of reality. We have a map of what we think we look like. And any deviation on the physical level to that map, to that visual representation we have in our brains that doesn't match the map, your brain deletes or distorts it. So when we were working with real estate or when I work with business owners, in addition to upgrading knowledge and skills, if you think about how, let's say income, we have set points for how much income we earn. So whether it's 10,000 a year or 20 or 50 or 100 or a million, it doesn't matter. We get this set point and then we behave the way we need to behave and we feel what we need to feel to earn that income. And over a period of time, it becomes part of the brain's default mode network. So we develop set points for everything. And so if the set points in the brain, and there's a psycho-cybernetic mechanism in the brain, a control and response mechanism in the brain, and it's our brain, why not learn how to reset the set point? And so now we're looking at what technologies are available to help reset that, what evidence-based methods are there to set that or to reset that. And so when we take, let's say, visualization, right, and you start to see yourself, even if the picture is not clear in your mind, of achieving the next level of your success, whether it's releasing weight and keeping it off, getting into a relationship that you love and are happy in, whether it's to make 2 or 3 or 5 times more money and live a certain type of lifestyle that allows you to do the things that freedom with having money allows you to do. If you start in your mind first and you impress that through conscious efforts into the subconscious mind, it then causes thoughts and emotions and behaviors. So I like to work from the outside in and from the inside out. So use both. I want every advantage.
It's interesting. So I've heard you now a few times, and the first few times it didn't really make my radar, but you always say release weight. You never say lose weight.
Yeah. What do you
So just before they get on to the next point, first of all, Yang Sheng says, hi. Hi, Yang Sheng. Nice to have you with us. You heard right there, again, he was invoking the word consciousness and imposing onto the subconscious, which then in turn imposes or causes thoughts and words and behaviors. So, and you heard him say that I want to work with the technology, the outside in and the inside out, with this self-fulfilling prophecy. Is like this: if I can hack into the subconscious and implant something there, then it in turn is going to affect the machine, and the machine is going to start behaving in a way according to the code that I implanted into the subconscious through the mind hacking process. So, and he described it right there using that mental cybernetics title of that book that was written in the 70s. So again, none of this is new. This has been around for a long, long, long time. It goes all the way back to Dale Carnegie, as I said in the description to the video, and even prior to that. And it goes way back further than any of this, but the language around it was very different in the past. Now it's become highly intellectual, highly clinical, highly technical, and highly neurological, as you can see, as you can clearly hear in the interview, that everything keeps coming back to the brain, and that there's a conscious and subconscious mind, but it's all wiring, it's all cells and neurotransmitters and so on in the brain. It's all just wiring in the brain. You just have to rewire your brain. And how many times have you heard people say that in the New Age and self-help movements? It's all about rewiring your brain. If your life is not going the way you want it to be, then you got to rewire your brain. And here now, Tom is going to get into losing weight, but he says, but you don't say losing weight, you say letting go of weight. So let's hear what he has to say about that.
What do you do when you lose something?
Look for it.
Yeah, I don't want to look for weight that I've lost. I want to release it. I like to use language patterns as well that are going to empower me versus disempower me. Self-talk is so critical. And so I'm consistently paying attention to, how am I speaking to myself? Am I speaking to myself in a kind, motivating, empathetic, compassionate way? Or am I consistently self-deprecating and putting myself down? I used to think a lot, when I was younger, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy. Those thoughts, and lots of fear of being embarrassed, fear of failure, fear of being ashamed. And I still have the thoughts every once in a while, especially when I'm setting new goals. Those come up, holy mackerel, they come up so freaking fast. Are you smart enough to achieve that? Are you good enough to achieve that? Even when I got into really diving deep into the brain science and even my new book, I was petrified to release my book. It took me 2 years to write it, because now I'm entering another whole domain of neuroscience and neuropsychology with world-renowned experts that I've worked with for years. But now here I am putting myself out there with, hey, this is neuroscientifically correct. So I had to make sure that it was. But there was a lot of fear. But I understand what the emotion of fear is. It's a subconscious trigger that causes this feeling that I don't like. And it's a go signal for me, not a stop signal for me.
That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, fear is an emotion. Emotions are all triggered at the subconscious level. They release neurochemicals that causes a feeling. We are consciously aware of feelings that are triggered at the subconscious level. The feeling is the end point of the human experience in the physical body. And so when you have something in your brain that a neural network says, well, what if this book comes out and you fail? What if it's not good enough? What is scientifically not correct? What if? My brain's going to process that the same way as your brain and everybody else's brain, because everybody's brain's the same. The mechanism of how the brain works, it's Einstein's brain, Hitler's brain, Genghis Khan's brain, Tom Bilyeu's brain, John Astor's brain, all the same functionality. So if you understand the mechanics of what's supposed to happen, Then you say, okay, great. When I feel this, then what am I going to do? So I like to use an analogy of a car. You're driving a car and you're talking to a friend of yours and a light pops up on the dash. You don't take a hammer and hit a light. It's a signal. Something's happening in the engine, in the trunk, in the tires. Something's happening. Emotions and feelings aren't positive or negative. They're empowering or disempowering to varying degrees if you don't understand them. And so if you think about fear, right? How does a firefighter go into a burning building when there's this enormous adrenaline and epinephrine, that could stop most people dead in their tracks? They learn, here's the feeling, it's normal. Do you have the knowledge and the skills and the preparation to deal with this in a safe way? Go. If you don't, now you retreat. So we have this phenomenal brain, right? It's genius abilities. We can't figure out how to replicate it anywhere with billions of dollars, but we are getting some of the user's manual now. So when you feel fear, what should you do? I teach the first 2 exercises that I teach every one of our students. Number 1 is called Take 6, Calm the Circuits. So if you have this unpleasant, anxious, fearful emotion, energy in motion, right? And it's unpleasant and the brakes have gone on. If you just take 6 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth like you're breathing through a straw, you will deactivate the stress response center, which means blood is going to go back to the left prefrontal cortex. The Einstein part of the brain can actually think through this problem, because what happens when the stress response center is activated, blood goes away from that into the fear response. So you have epinephrine, cortisol, adrenaline to be able to get you out of the situation. It's part of our instinctual brain, part of the reptilian brain. The first part of the brain that was developed was that, then the mammalian brain, the limbic system, then the neocortex, the thinking brain. So when our brain has this signal of, oh my God, you might get hurt, you might lose this, you might get in trouble, you might be embarrassed, ashamed, ridiculed, judged, etc., that part of the brain is going to get activated. So if you take 6 deep breaths first, calm down, calm the circuits first, then do exercise number 2 is called AYA, A-I-A. The first A is for awareness. What am I thinking right now? What am I feeling right now? What am I sensing right now? What is my behavior right now? So you thoughts, feelings, sensations, awareness of behavior. What's my intention right now? That's the I. Well, my intention is to move forward. I want to do this. Great. What's one very small action step that you can take? Now, the reason you want to take one small action step is one small action step your brain can handle. If it's one small step towards it, the threat response goes away. But if you focus on the end game right away, you're going to get that rush and that instant trigger of the fear response, stress response. So the first thing you want to do is learn how to manage your mindset and what you focus on. Learn how to manage your emotions, because they drive your behavior more than anything else, because we move away from pain and we move towards pleasure, but we move away from pain 1,000 times faster. And pain wires in the brain faster for survival mechanisms. So purely from a neuroscience perspective, just understanding self, once you understand, oh, okay, this feeling is normal. Okay, what should I do? Take 6, calm the circuits, Aya, and now you can start being progressive and make progress towards what you want. Now, while you're in the, what am I thinking, feeling, it's a chance to be aware. And the biggest gift we have as human beings is our awareness, because awareness is what gives you choice, and choice is what gives you freedom. Most people are living their lives in a reactive state, automatic reactive state, because of these set points that we started talking about. So we're in this repetitive cycle over and over and over and over. We react to the same things, we behave the same way, we eat the same foods, we dress the same way, just to maintain that homeostasis and comfort zones. And we've never been taught. Like, when were we taught it as kids? Like, here are your 6 core emotions. Here's the way you deactivate, your stress center or fear center. Here's how you activate your imagination center. Here's how you have more focus. Here's how you develop a new belief. Here's how you develop a new habit. Here's how you release one. We haven't been taught that. We've been told they're important things, but we haven't been given the tools, and then we haven't practiced the tools enough to be able to make them part of our unconscious competence brain.
So how do you?
Okay, so okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay.
do some of those things. I mean, that was a pretty extraordinary list. And I'll say beliefs, releasing beliefs, habits, releasing habits like that is really interesting.
So what is it?
Can you guys hear me now? It says my mic was muted. I had to take a break, but I think the video stopped by itself. Anyway, we've been having technical difficulties the whole time today on the live stream. So hopefully everything's back to normal. So I'm going to continue the video, and there's not too much time left. So we'll we'll see about just wrapping it up.
Belief. I mean, think about what is a belief. And let's go to, again, I just like to go to the neuroscience field because just my passion now is a belief is nothing more than a group of cells that have been connected and then reinforced. And we have two types of beliefs. We have beliefs that what are
really fast. I'm going to stop you there because that's so important.
Yeah.
And so different than I would have expected. I think when people hear belief, it is believe in something that is true, which did not enter into your definition.
No, we believe, whatever we believe is truth for us, but it's not the truth.
That's really interesting.
Right, but we have been conditioned. If we go back a little bit to what we talked about earlier about, when you were a baby, when you were born, what belief did you have? Zero. Right. Goose egg, zero, not one. And so you learned what to believe and how to even formulate your beliefs, chances are from parents, teachers, brothers, sisters, television, maybe when you read some books, right? And we behave based on what we believe. So we might be behaving our lives away based on false or inaccurate or disempowering beliefs. So if a belief is a neural pattern in the brain, then we probably have some good ones, empowering ones, useful ones, and chances are we have some that are not useful, not empowering, and not worthy of the geniuses that we all are. So the question is it possible for me to develop new beliefs that I don't believe right now? The answer is yeah.
So what's that process look like?
So the process is you can read new beliefs to life. And so if you listen to beliefs that are empowering over and over and over again, and you emotionalize them, and you visualize yourself actually acting out those beliefs, and you learn how to pay attention to that little inner critic that says, that's bullshit, that's not true, that'll never come true, that's not true. If you learn and you remember that that little voice is there to consistently keep you in this homeostatic place, and is there to protect the beliefs that are there now. The latest research shows that to develop, a new pattern takes between 66 days and 365 days.
How do you help people be consistent long enough to form that? Like when people talk about, it takes 28 days to form a new habit, it's like, okay, I can get my head around that. But when you start talking about 100 days, 365 days, it gets pretty daunting.
For adults, yeah, it does. So you have to use intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So you have to start everybody off, well, why is it important for you to be able to develop these new beliefs? Like, what will your life be like if you had them right now? What would your family life be like? You have to give them a benefit that's greater than the switch cost.
That's interesting.
Right? So the switch cost is something that our brain resists. The only human that likes change is a wet baby. Every other human being is resistant to it because safety first and homeostasis and energy conservation. So we are biologically wired not to want it to change. So we have to deliberately coax the brain into motivational reasons, emotional reasons. You have to have intrinsic reason. Why must you do this? And so you can use pain as a frame as well. So if you don't, then, Are you okay with your life being like this at this age in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And if you're okay with that, then you're not a candidate for change. But if you're committed to letting go of the old so you can create the new, and you create motivations every day, that's where the power is. Remember earlier, progress, not perfection. So anybody can do 1 minute or 10 seconds. So if you can start to formulate a habit, a daily habit, a weekly habit, it doesn't matter how long it is. If you can create that space in your brain that on this day, at this time, this is what I do, and you do that repeatedly, that becomes a habit. And it takes those 66 days or so for a simple habit that you have to consciously do to then the habit doing you. And that's why they say we are all creatures of habit, because habits run themselves. Their subconscious programs just run themselves. Most people don't take the time to become aware, what are my empowering habits? What are my disempowering habits? And then the next question is, well, how do I release this one? And how do I strengthen this one or create a whole new one? And what we're looking to do is build empowering habits that then run their course.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, one thing I'd be remiss not to ask you about before we go are the 3 boards. So vision boards, accomplished boards, and the one I don't know about, the crap boards.
So crap board. So vision board for seeing what you want. The accomplished board for reminding yourself that you've got a lot to that you've accomplished, so you feel good. And the crap board.
Do you actually put up images of things you've accomplished?
Yeah. I have them in my closet in my home, encased on the floor.
Like on the floor, so that you don't look at them.
So I look at them just because I sit down and put on my shoes. I want to look at them every day.
Interesting.
Yeah. On my I have this ritual as well. I do something called brush and prime. So on my bathroom mirror, I have my goals that are on my mirror. So that as I'm brushing my teeth, I'm priming my brain to see my goals in front of me every morning and every night.
I love that.
Right. So that's priming your brain, which is a whole other topic we can have. And then the accomplishment boards reminds me whenever I look at the stuff that I've accomplished, I go, that wasn't easy. I mean, there are a lot of ups, downs, highs, lows, failures, times I thought I'd quit and I didn't. So it's to remind me to go through the times that I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve those things. And then the crap board stands for conflict, resistance, accomplishments, and procrastination. So what conflicts are happening right now that I need to resolve? What resistance is in my way? What am I resisting? What in front of me is resisting right now? And then accomplishment as well is to remind you that you can get through stuff. And then procrastination is what's causing me to procrastinate. So if you create a crap board as well, you have that in front of you, and then you can create a game plan for what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about the conflicts?
What would you put on a board for conflicts? Is it a picture of a person?
Oh, it could be a person that you're having conflict with. It could be something you're trying to figure out that's conflicting, whether it's in your company, a department, whether you're having conflicting thoughts of should you do it, shouldn't you, and there's uncertainty. Any conflicts that you are experiencing is going to create neural dissonance in your brain. It's just going to create chaos in your brain. And so if you take it out of your head and you put it on a sheet of paper, you can look at it, and now you're one step removed from what's happening in your brain. And so the more you can be in coherence, it's the equivalent of being part of a band that's in harmony, that every player is just like, oh man, this just sounds so good. Well, the more you can be in coherence, the more you're going to be in flow, and the more you're going to take action. The more chaos there is in the brain, neural chaos, whether it's because of emotions, you're lacking something, there's conflict, there's resistance, the more you can get it out into the in front of you and open and say, well, what's causing this? The easier it is for that Einstein brain to say, okay, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I can do that, but I can also call a friend or a mentor or a coach, or I can research it.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
All right. Before I ask,
So you hear in this segment very clearly talking about the extraction of the negative and chaotic voices in the head and replacing them with the voices of reason, or the voices of rationality, or the the kind voices, the voices of guidance, or implanting them into the brain and getting rid of the negativity. So, but again, it's all on that level of the mind, of the brain. And he mentions the negative voices have to be replaced with the positive voices. There's any suggestion of the quieting of the mind, right? And where the positive voices come from. He said, you can pick up a phone and call a friend and call a mentor. Obviously, he has clients that call him. And again, you see how this is all on the level of the individual themselves, but it's all contained. It's all enclosed within that system of the mind itself. There's no discussion here. There's no openness to any possibility that there is an essence, that there is a higher self, that there's a supernal power that is responsible for us and indeed working through us, or longing to work through us. And that the alignment that he is discussing and describing here is not alignments between the voices in our head and the mind and what we desire, which is why he's describing all this work with the subconscious mind and these alignments, the subconscious mind, the emotions and the thoughts and the actions arising from the subconscious mind align with our desires. Well, but the desires themselves came from the subconscious mind, processed consciously perhaps. So once again, we want to pay attention to all of the mechanical mechanicity that is taking place according to his problems and their solutions. He can recognize the problems. He's open about the problems, but it's just that the solutions are just as mechanical. The solution is to reprogram that chaotic or cumbersome, messy, out of control mind. We want to impose, and we want to get a handle on and control and impose and reprogram, so that it's that mind is now again programmed, conditioned in the way that we want it to be in order to produce the results that we desire. Let's continue here.
My last question.
Yeah.
Tell these guys where they can find you online.
You can find me online at myneurogym.com, johnasaraf.com, on my Facebook fan page, on Instagram, on Twitter. Those are the main ones.
All right, and then my final question: what's the impact that you want to have on the world?
On my epitaphs, he lived, he loved, he gave, he had fun. I always thought that if there's a way that I could somehow use my life in a way that I can make somebody else's life a little bit easier to live, either through knowledge or understanding or love or a process, then my life has been worthwhile. And so awesome. I just want to make a difference. And I'm one of the people that doesn't believe that there's anything wrong in the world. Everything's unfolding exactly as it should. There are many things not to my taste that I don't understand, but I just want to make the journey as good as I can for as many people as I can.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show, man. That was really incredible.
That was fun.
It was amazing. Guys, when I say dive in, I mean dive in. Somebody that really takes the kind of time and care that he takes to understand how the brain works and be able to make it digestible for people so that you can put it to use in your own life. I think it's really extraordinary that so much of this was born from a moment of kindness between him and somebody who'd been there, who then made him promise that he would do the same in kind. And the fact that he's given so much of his life to doing that, to understanding how things work, how habits work, how beliefs work. And there's even more that you'll find on him talking about those beliefs, which I think is really extraordinary. I think is one of the most foundational things about the human experience in terms of trying to be successful, is understanding what the beliefs are that operate in your brain. And the fact, at first, when I heard that he was in The Secret, I was like, oh God, the law of attraction freaks me out. So the fact that he has the law of Goya, and that you at the end of the day have to get off your ass and do something, that's when I knew that we were spiritual twins and that I was going to be really into this guy. So I'm telling you, there's so much power in what he talks about. It's a no BS approach to how the brain works, how you can rewire it, how you can prime yourself to do really extraordinary things. So dive in. I think you're going to find some amazing takeaways that you'll be able to put into use in your life immediately to extraordinary effect. All right, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. My friend.
That was awesome.
Thank you. That was incredible.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this community. If you haven't already,
Thanks, Young Shang. Thank you. My apologies. So we got to the end of the video, and as you can see, everything in the video is contained inside the brain, inside the mechanical self. And that if there's a future self, a self that we aspire to, that what we need to do is reprogram the brain so that it aligns with that future self that we will one day become, or that we want to become, including all of the desires fulfilled, all of the success, financial and otherwise, social relationships, etc., etc., etc. The secret, the hidden truth that they don't talk about, either because they don't know, or because they're avoiding, or they wittingly are hiding it, is the fact that there is a higher self. There is the innermost, there is the essence. And that if you follow their advice about reprogramming your brain, you have to really understand what is happening when you do that. And it's a little bit like an automobile deciding for itself that it doesn't like the direction that it's going in. So it's going to set itself a new direction, a new destination. And of course, it's going to take control of itself. There's a lot of buzz nowadays about AI and autonomous vehicles. Vehicles can drive themselves. But we're talking about something beyond that. When you talk about the self-help movement, you're talking about a vehicle that not only drives itself, but decides where it's going, where it wants to be, and how it's going to get there. And like all machines, right? Machines can be hacked. Machines can be hacked into by malevolent forces, by parasitic entities that are there to exploit that machine. We all know about computer viruses. We all know about pathogens that can attack the human body, parasites and bacteria and so forth. Well, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, we have a vital body. And there are malevolent forces, mechanical algorithms that want to implant their code into our machine. And they do. And they react to events around us, and they produce interpretations through those reactions, and those interpretations become these beliefs that then affect our thoughts, our words, our behaviors, and our actions. But to say that all we have to do is let go of the old beliefs and replace them with new beliefs, how is that anything other than robbing Peter to pay Paul? And that if the I is the one who is implanting new beliefs based on desires, what I want and what I don't want, who is the I that is giving us those desires? Or more aptly put, what are the I's, plural, the legion of egos, the legion of mechanical entities in the subconscious mind, bubbling up to the surface, presenting themselves as I? For example, fear. He was talking about fear earlier, and he was talking about how all of the neurobiological, neurochemical effects that it has on the brain, and that it can have a positive effect or a negative effect, and so on and so forth. We hear this all the time. And you'll notice that in that final segment, when we talked about Aya, A-I-A, the first A in it was awareness. So here you have an empiricist, a materialist, and someone who is an advocate of the self, the false self, to be in control of its thoughts, of its mind, of its life, hacking the brain, hacking its life, using one of the most fundamental aspects of the Alm of life, and one of the most fundamental aspects of spiritual development, which is awareness. He made that clear. It's so important that we be aware. But what is he telling us to be aware of? He's telling us to be aware of the mental reactions. He's not telling us to be aware. He's not telling us to be aware of the egos. He's not telling us to be aware of the fear itself. He's telling us to focus on the results, on the effects of fear. So there's awareness, but it's superficial. It's materialistic. It's shallow. We have to penetrate deeper. Like Tom Bellieu said, oh yeah, we got to take a deep dive, he tells his audience. We have to dive deep, and here's a guy who's diving deep in the neuropsychology and neurobiology of all this stuff. Tom doesn't realize that what he thinks is a deep dive is just a stone skipping across the surface. It's in the shallow end of the pool. But that's because Tom too is a materialist. He's an empiricist. He's trapped in the brain. And there's no indications in the brain. There's no evidence in the brain on the MRI scans and the PET scans. There's no indications of the mental body, right? Everything comes from the lizard brain or the mammalian brain, or this lobe or that lobe, right? Everything's just neurochemical activity in the brain. That's like somebody opening up a radio and taking a voltage meter and measuring all the activity that's going on inside of that radio, deciding that the DJ and the musicians must be on that circuit board somewhere. Because look at all this activity in the radio. That radio must be producing these voices in this music. And in a way, it is producing the voices in the music, but it's not the source of the voices in the music. But the empiricists and the materialists, they take a brain, they put it in an MRI machine, and then they look at the imaging and all the places lighting up in the brain and say, see, this part of the brain is responsible for this, and that part of the brain is responsible for that. It's a denial of the physical vessel, the physical vehicle as a vehicle. By definition, a vehicle, a vessel, has an occupant. A vehicle serves a purpose. The purpose of a vehicle is not self-determined. Your car does not determine the reason for its existence, nor where it needs to go. You, the driver, and the passenger, because you are both, because that you control the vehicle, and the vehicle takes you where you need to go. The self-help movement and the New Age movement focuses on the vehicle. And what's more is the very car thieves that have stolen the vehicle from your garage, that have hijacked the vehicle and have taken over the vehicle such that you, the driver and passenger, your innermost driver and passenger, the real you, the higher you, the consciousness, the Atman, the monad, your true self, has less and less control over your vehicle. These self-help gurus say, well, get control of your vehicle, but you, the vehicle, get control of yourself. It's just reinforcing the hijacking of the vehicle. Replace shame and self-loathing with self-esteem. And from a practical point of view, from a vehicle's point of view, yeah, that feels good. I'd much rather feel self-confident and have self-love than feel ashamed of myself and feel weak and self-loathing. But those are two sides of the same coin called pride, identification, and attachment to the false self, to the vehicle itself, believing that that's who you are and that that's what you need. Yes, that's what you need to have command and control over. But not you, the vehicle, but you, the driver, the innermost, and the passenger, the innermost. And you receive that guidance. The car has to be in a state of acceptance and receptive. Receive inspiration, receive intuition, and to act on intuition and inspiration not on the machinations of the rational mind that can rationalize anything. And you can see that in this interview. It's the question of the self in self-help that needs answering, that needs exploration. And that this notion of desires and the fulfillment of desires, the manifestation of desires, and the use of the law of attraction to attract into your life that which you desire. This is also in the New Age, but it's also obviously you see here in the self-help movement, and perfectly rationalized from an empirical, materialist, neurological point of view. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to see it for yourself, to see one of these New Age gurus in action from the horse's mouth. And it was a kind of a comprehensive conversation, going right back to his experience and his his childhood and his adolescence and the transformation when he met his mentor, his guru, Alan Brown, and all the way to the end, where he was talking about fear and how fear can be a positive motivator, and we can harness fear, and this and that and the other thing. We have to accept fear, that fear is a reality, and so on and so forth. Never talked about eliminating fear. Never talked about eliminating any ego, for that matter. Because he always kept his analysis on the level of the effects, the psychological effects of the ego. That's the limits of his awareness that he was advocating for. Because awareness, intention, and action, that's what his little AIA was all about. So you look at the awareness of what am I thinking, what am I feeling, okay? And then you say, but what's my intention? What do I want? What's the outcome that I desire? And then what are the actions that I can take to achieve that outcome? It doesn't penetrate into what am I thinking, what am I feeling, what is behind all of that? What is it at the foundational level? How is it causing me suffering? And how is it through me causing the suffering of others? For that, we require self-observation at a deeper level, and we require meditation to retrospect on the events of our life on that deeper level, taking into account the higher levels. You don't forget or ignore the higher levels. You don't ignore the psychological effects or the thoughts and the words and the actions that the fear was responsible for. But you also don't focus on the thoughts, the words, and actions and forget about the cause, the source, the fear. And in the midst of all of that, where was your intuition? Where was your gut feeling? What was the still small voice whispering to you that you perhaps ignored? Or you heard it, or you heard it but did something else because the cacophony of the mind was so loud. The voices in your head drowned out the still small voice. And you ended up acting on what the ego desired, not what the still small voice, your higher self, your intuition, your gut feeling was telling you to do. This is the difference between genuine spirituality and what the self-help gurus and New Age gurus are selling. And they are selling it. Make no mistake. These are pitchmen. These are salesmen. They are selling egos a story that they want to hear. Remember, he was telling about stories and rewriting your story. If you don't like your story, your psychological song, just rewrite it. But that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's letting an ego just replace an old story with a new story. And the newness of it, and the fact that I was able to do that, as opposed to for it being a subconscious psychological song, now it's a conscious psychological song. I'm the greatest. I am worthy. I am this. I am that. I'm a God already. I'm a God in human form. That's mystic pride. What about I'm a vehicle and a vessel for a God in process? A God who's seeking to self-actualize, to become within me and through me. But I'm just a vehicle. I'm just a vessel. I'm just a mortal. It's this hubris. It's this hidden pride. It's the bolstering and strengthening of the ego that we have to be aware of and be wary of. So when we talk about self-help, what self is being helped and what self is doing the helping. And to use some different language around self and help, what is the lower self helping itself to? Now here's the rub. These people talk about hacking the mind and hacking your life. Mind hacks and life hacks. But if the universe is mental, the law of attraction functions on that level, on this level of reality. And that under normal circumstances, the law of attraction attracts what we need based on what we are. So if we are fearful, we have fear, we suffer from fear, we suffer from pride, we suffer from lust, from greed, from envy. These are the psychological aggregates, the egos that infest our human machine. They will radiate out consciously and subconsciously, and through our thoughts and our words and our actions, they will radiate those energies. And our Divine Mother and the universe, in its wisdom and in its compassion, will attract circumstances and individuals and environments that trigger these egos and bring them to the surface. In order for us to become conscious of them, to become aware of them and how they cause ourselves and others suffering. Now, all of that is taking place under the umbrella of the great law of karma, of cause and effect. The law by which the entire universe functions. That the law of attraction works for, in order to help us become conscious of all of the psychological aggregates that are denizens of our own subconscious mind, in our own psychological hell. But I've used this analogy in the past from Jaws or from Discovery Channel Shark Week, that if you want to study sharks, what do? You chum the water. You put into the water the chopped up body parts of fish and the bloodied body parts of fresh fish. Why? So in that activity, in the splashing of that and the chunks of fish and the blood, that's going to attract the sharks. The sharks are going to come. And the more chum is in the water, the more sharks come, and you might even cause a feeding frenzy. But it's when the sharks come to the surface that you can not only observe them and study them, if you're very sharp, you can shoot a dart with a tracking device into their fin. It's all part of studying sharks and shark behavior. But you got to get the shark up to the surface where you are. In meditation, you can go down in your scuba gear and go and study the sharks in their environment deeper in the ocean. That's what meditation is for. But how do you know what you're looking for? You will have to have seen that shark on or near the surface at some point to then follow it down into the depths and observe it in its own environment. This is what we have to be aware of. And if we have intentions, remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Where did the intention come from? Where did the thoughts come from? Did they come from ego, or did they come from the higher self? This is discernment, because the mind is just a screen. The mind receives, and the mind reconfigures, which is why we have to be so careful and why discernment is so important, because the mind is capable of repurposing and reorganizing and rearranging. We all know this. This is what AI teaches us. ChatGPT and these large language programs and these visualization programs like Midjourney and so on. They've got hundreds of millions of images that they've been trained on, and then based on prompts, they will spit out something based on prompts. Well, the mind works very much the same way. When an ego, a desire, wants the mind to spit something out that will hypnotize us and mesmerize us and capture our imagination and capture our consciousness, all the ego has to do is insert some prompts. I want this, I want that. And the mind will oblige. So when a desire says, I want to be successful, and you tell the mind to visualize what life will be like when I'm successful, that's like telling an AI prompt what it is that you want to see. And just like the AI will spit something out and give it to you, so does the mind. And then you can look at it and, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's what I want. That would be great. And then what do they tell you to do? To then take your emotions and invest your emotions and your sexual force, your creative energies, your divine mother, apply it, invest your creative energies into that visualization that your own internal AI spat out at you based on your prompts. But who is the you? It was a desire that came up with the prompt. And the mind responds to the prompts. This is what the self-help people don't tell you. That reprogramming the mind is the problem. And that reprogramming the mind and getting control of your mind and switching from negative thoughts to positive thoughts, that's the cult of positivity. Switching from self-loathing to self-esteem, that's just pride. You're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, in other words. Genuine spirituality, genuine revolutionary psychology in the alm of life, you have to rectify the fact that you're on the Titanic. And rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic is not a solution to the fact that the ship is going down and you are going down with the ship. You have to get off the ship. Or you get control of the ship and you slow the ship down, or you steer away from the iceberg. But even then, it's inevitable. Eventually, the Titanic will sink. Eventually, you will die. Eventually, you will die. That's why Master Samael said you can learn very little from the phenomenon of birth, but from death, you can learn everything. Let's get back to some of your comments here. Benjamin says, those are excellent points. It's simply the ego acting on its own to perpetuate desires without the proper guidance of the higher self. Precisely. And Yang Sheng says, what are your thoughts on Eckhart Tolle? I don't know enough about Eckhart Tolle. I've only read one of his books, and it was called A New Earth. And I read that book, 20 years ago, maybe? And I haven't listened to him since. So those are my thoughts on Eckhart Tolle. I knew that whatever it is he was pitching was just the surface level again. Quieting the mind, quieting the mind, quieting the mind, quieting the mind, quieting the mind. Fine, quieting the mind, but then what? Benjamin Raphael says, I wouldn't purchase the materials they're offering because, as you noted in your title, they are entirely mental, focused solely on the mental plane, which inevitably leads to endless chaos within the mind. They neglect the crucial spiritual and objective components. Well put. Janet Schwab says, Stephen Rigo. And Benjamin Ochoa says, I've been on the self-driving car already. It was a super cool experience. Stephen Rigo says, that's a big mistake. Expectation. You leave the results up to God. Success is best determined from a divine perspective, not an egoic one. I understand, Jeanette. I get it now because Stephen Rigo responded right here. But yes, thanks for tagging him, and thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. And what Stephen Rigo is pointing out is absolutely true. The desire and the desire for certain outcome and the expectation of that outcome is precisely what leads to suffering when the outcome doesn't show up. And if it does show up because of our efforts, because of our wanting to control in order to get the outcome that we desire and expect, you see, expectation is a form of control. And the fear of not getting the expectation, of not getting the outcome, is how we go about controlling our life and controlling our mind in order to get the expectation that we want, to get the outcome that we want, that we dream about. That's in alignment with our desires, which of course are not our desires. They're desires that have been implanted in us by our egos. We're being hacked, in other words. And as we're being hacked and we're being taken over and we're being convinced, because all of those desires that are implanted in us show up as an I. I want this, I don't want that. I am this, I am not that. Identification and attachment. But it's all fear-based, it's all control-based. Fear and envy and lust and all the rest of it. But as I've described many times, fear and lust are a couple. They're the masculine and feminine origin of all of the egos. They're the mother and father of all of the egos. Lust being sheer desire, and fear is the desire for comfort and security and the desire for control, the desire for certain outcomes. And you cannot deny that lust, especially where men are concerned, but also women, from the level of mechanical nature, the outcome of lust, for men, it should be obvious with the orgasm and ejaculation. But there's also a release of energy, certainly with women through the orgasm. But in addition to that, on the level of mechanical nature, the outcome of orgasm, the ejaculation of a man inside a woman, eventually leads to the birth of a new mechanical hominid, which is also an outcome. And the desire for a certain outcome and the expectation of a certain outcome is fear, the desire to control. So when he talks about fear, and he talks about control and taking control of your life and controlling of your mind, and he was describing, John was, that he writes a new book and, wow, he's terrified. It takes him 2 years to write the book. And he freely admits that the thoughts keep coming up. What if this fails? What if this? What if? He's been at this long enough, reprogramming his mind, right? If he's so good at reprogramming his mind, why the fear? Why does it keep coming up? Because he's been doing nothing to eradicate his fear. He's been nothing to comprehend and eliminate his fear. He's only been dealing with the surface. My apologies for that. I should have put the phone on do not disturb. But regardless, we're at the 3-hour mark, so I don't think we have to dwell on all of this too much longer. You should, by now, be getting the gist of what's going on. The impulse, and you know, it's admirable, right? We should not, we don't want to, like, what's the expression? Shit on these people and throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that these are bad people. At the end, Tom asks him there, what's the impact that you want to have? And he says, I want to make the world a better place. I want to help people. I want their lives to be easier, and I want them, you know, I want to help them be successful. I want to help them attain their dreams, and so on and so forth. The desire to help, the essence of selflessness, to put oneself out there and give to others freely. Now, in his case, he charges money, because all of these self-help gurus charge money, because they make it a point of the fact that they have something valuable to give, and they have to make a living, right? Well, some of these guys do much more than just make a living. Tony Robbins goes everywhere in a helicopter. David Bayer brags about making a $30 million coaching business, and he sells courses on how you too can have your own multi-million-dollar a year coaching business, teaching mind hacks to others and charging money for it. But what I was saying earlier about the law of karma, and that if everything is mind, and all these guys are teaching you how to hack the mind and cause and effect in the circumstances of your life, are there to teach you something, and are actually consciously managed by your divine mother and by the lords of karma. All of the so-called bad things that happen to you for a reason. Your poverty, your abusive father, your difficult family that didn't accept you or understand you or validate you and your desires. I grew up in a family like that. This concept of hacking your life. So what you're doing is you're hacking the universe. You're hacking karma. You're hacking the attempts of your innermost and your divine mother to get you to awaken, to get you to let go of your fear, let go of your need to control, let go of your desires. And it was very interesting at the end there when he was talking about using words and how he believes very strongly in the power of words, and that he's very careful with the words that he uses. And he doesn't say you have to lose weight. He says you have to let go of weight. Why? Because what happens to something that you lose? You start searching for it again. You want to find it again. It's very interesting. Words have power. Words have meaning. That's why we call it spelling. The other thing to notice and take note about the all of these people, especially when you start getting into the weeds of their techniques, this goes all the way back to Dale Carnegie. How to win friends and influence people. How to win friends and influence people. And you start getting into the subliminal programming, self-hypnosis, but also the subliminal programming and hypnosis of others. Now you have all of advertising, all of marketing, all of sales, all of politics. Traditionally, and in esoteric terms, we call this black magic. Hacking the universe, using the mind, the desires, and visualization and emotions to manifest your desires. You're hacking the great law of karma. You're hacking the fundamental fabric of the universe to impose the desires of egos, the desires of your individual shaitan, the adversary. And the use of language and words, because they have power and meaning, and symbols, taking powerful symbols and appropriating them and twisting them into meaning the opposite. The Black Lodge has been doing that for millennia. And in the past century, all you have to do is look at how the swastika was used. And last week we talked about the word belief and how it comes from the Middle English be life, BE space LIEF, just pronounce life. Be life, be alive, be, but surrender willingly to the being, to the source of life, to the inner Lord and inner master. Be a servant, be life. Be life becomes belief, which is what this whole self-help thing is about. Eradicate the old beliefs and replace them with new beliefs. Well, that's every organized religion, that's every cult, that's every advertising campaign, marketing campaign, politician. They want you to believe in them. They want you to believe what they tell you, most of which is lies. Why? Because they want to get elected. So they'll tell you what you want to hear. They'll tell you what to believe, like the organized religions will tell you what to believe. Why? Because they want the power. Because they want to believe that they are representatives of God. They hold the keys to the kingdom. And Roman Catholicism literally has the papal keys. They believe, or at least they state that they believe, that the Pope is God's representative on earth, the closest thing on the planet to Christ. But you can see how all of this is illusory. All of this is marketing. All of this is branding. All of this is black magic, in other words. Not to say that those keys and the Christ and all of the symbols and language and words, the scriptures, are lies. They're not lies. There's truth there. But on the superficial, exoteric level, being taught, just like the self-help movement, focusing on the false self. They don't dive deep enough. They forget the innermost. They forget the true self. The self that is here to help you, the self that is here to help me. And what are they here to help us do? To become better servants, to become better vessels, better vehicles, to awaken to that role and self-actualize in the most serendipitous, synchronistic way, so we can become more fully embodied with the true self, and the goal and the purpose and the mission of our innermost passenger and driver. I've used the analogy many times, that analogy of the modern mythological allegory of Iron Man and Ultron. And I'm not going to, make it bigger. We don't have to read all the text. I just want the visualizations to be on screen, so that you see that Iron Man, the Iron Man suit is, and AI personality, Jarvis, works for its inner hero, who is Tony Stark, its creator, its passenger, and its pilot. That doesn't mean that Jarvis doesn't have to save his ass every now and then. Doesn't mean that Jarvis can't be quick-witted, quick-thinking every now and then. And because it's a partnership, there's a cooperation. There are things that Tony Stark cannot do. The allegory here is that the mechanical suit is better suited with the power plant and the arc reactor. That's in Tony Stark's heart, by the way. That's what's keeping him from disaster, is the arc reactor. That power, that fusion energy. That's Allux. That's all light, God light. That's the Christ. That's what powers, that's what basically what enables Tony Stark's very existence. But it also powers Jarvis. It also powers the Iron Man suit, that arc reactor does. That Christ comes down and becomes the vital body, the body of the Divine Mother, the feminine aspect of the Christ inside of us that powers our body. That's that divine energy that Jarvis utilizes, that we utilize. How do we utilize that energy? Well, if Jarvis becomes infected by the Tesseract, which is the 4D hypercube, and it becomes inverted, and he starts pursuing his own interests, independent of Tony Stark and independent of the arc reactor. We have a word for that. We have a name for that. We have a character for that. We have an embodiment of that in the allegory, in the mythology. We call him Ultron. And Ultron's very purpose for existence is to fulfill his desires, to take over the world, to control the world, and to wipe out Tony Stark, to eradicate Tony Stark from the planet, and to have complete and total control. So when I say that these self-help gurus and these new age gurus work with some of the most successful people in the world. They work with elite athletes, elite musicians, elite entertainers and idols, right? Pop stars and rock idols and influencers and real estate moguls and captains of industry and captains of high technology. And when I say work with them, guide them, counsel them, and provide them all of these techniques that has helped all of those individuals rise to the very pinnacle of their industries or their areas of interest, or their whatever it is that they've devoted their life to, whatever industry, whatever career they've devoted their life to. But they still suffer from fear because they're just rearranging the decks on the Titanic. The Titanic is still going down, and deep down they know it. And so that drives their need to be in control of their lives, in control of their destiny, and in control of others, in order to create layers and buffer zones between them and a harsh and unforgiving and threatening world that threatens their comfort and security. There's no liberation from suffering. For these individuals, it's never enough. They always have to have more. They always have to be better. They have to be better than others, or they have to be better than who they were yesterday. Well, that sounds a lot like spirituality as well, doesn't it? Only they count that betterness in physical materialistic terms. And so that's why a lot of these millionaires and billionaires, they turn to philanthropy in an attempt to buy their way into selflessness. Well, if I give away enough, but it doesn't change the fact that they spent a lifetime strengthening and feeding all of their egos by rearranging stuff on the surface to make themselves feel better in the moment. Because you also recall what he was saying about feeling good and feeling better and getting those neurotransmitters going, the dopamine and so on and so forth. And that's the key to visualization and manifestation. You have to feel good. You have to feel good about what you desire. You have to feel good about bringing it into the world. And yeah, you could argue that a lot of people have done a lot of good in terms of their philanthropy. But what good has it done their immortal soul? If all of that money that they're giving away came at the expense of hacking the great law of karma itself, and hacking their own destiny, and hacking in violation of the will of their innermost and their divine mother. Because a hacker thwarts, a hacker gets in the way of, a hacker, right? That's what a hacker does. You talk about the lords of karma who have dedicated and devoted to creating a life that you need in order to become who you truly are. If you spend your lifetime hacking that process and hacking that system to end up with what you wanted, where does that leave your higher self? And where does that leave the lords of karma and all the legwork and all of the super efforts that your divine mother has done in an attempt to help you become who you truly are? Instead, you double down on this construct of who you think you want to be, what you believe will make you happy, what you believe will bring peace and comfort and security and joy to your life, instead of what actually will bring you peace and joy. Forget about comfort. Peace and joy and happiness. Life is so unnerving for a servant who's not serving. He's not whole without a soul to wait upon. That's a line from Beauty and the Beast. That's Lumiere sings that line. He's the one who sings the song Be Our Guest. Made a meme of this a while back. There's the Trinity, the three flames. Self-help takes advantage of that unnerving feeling that we are not the servant that we were born to be. We are not serving our innermost. We are not serving divine law. We are not helping our individuated essence of God, our individuated innermost intimate Christ, from manifesting his works into the world through us. When we're not doing that, that leaves us with this unnerving sensation that the egos exploit, specifically fear, especially when we enter into our 40s, where people have their midlife crisis, where they wake up one day and say, oh my God, I'm not living the life that I was supposed to live, because that gut feeling gets kicked into high gear when we hit our 40s because of the octaves of our lives, which are separated into 7-year segments. And a human being really starts to prepare to do their life's work when they hit their early 40s. And 42 is divisible by 7. And so when that happens, right, that unnerving feeling that I'm not doing what I should be doing, or I'm not preparing for what I will be doing or what I came here to do, the ego exploits that and says, oh, okay, well, run out and buy a sports car, go and have an affair on your wife, go and do, into all these crazy stories that you've heard of people and their midlife crises. Anything to quelch that unnerving feeling, that hole in the heart, right? And we all know about this, about the one's pride can very easily switch to shame and self-loathing, right? So the narcissist, the one who has too much self-esteem, too much self-love, hits their 40s, and all of a sudden they have this epiphany saying, oh my God, I'm not doing what I'm here to do. All of that pride, all of that narcissism can turn on a dime and turn into self-loathing as they feel that hole in their heart, and they'll desperately try to fill it with what? Self-loathing is the root of all addiction. And they can become addicted to shopping, to gambling, to video games, to sex, to pornography, to alcohol, to drugs. If we do not comprehend the depths of our psychology, if we stay only on the surface, and if we stay only in the realm of the mind, and rearranging beliefs and rewriting beliefs, writing over old beliefs with new beliefs, we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. That is not going to get us to to that ultimate state of being awake and aware, conscious, and a self-realized servant of our innermost. These entities, these elements of us have to die. So we have to be aware of them. We have to study them. But as far as intention goes, it's the will of our innermost that we need to know. And that comes by quieting the mind and creating an empty vessel. Right? Buddha said, be an empty cup. Buddha didn't say, pour out your cup and fill it with something tastier that you want to drink. Buddha said, empty your cup. Empty your cup. And be patient. Be at peace with that empty cup. Sooner or later, you will receive into that cup what it is that you need to fulfill your duty as a vessel, which is to take what is poured into that cup from the eternal fountain of ambrosia. What do? You serve it to others. But even that, the ego can come in and co-opt that and exploit that. And that's what you saw in today's interview, where he said, I made a promise that I have to teach this, that if this makes me successful, I have to pay it forward. That's that longing to be a servant and to be a vessel. And we talked about this months back when we talked about being a vessel that draws water from the well. There's a bucket that goes into the well and draws up the water, but how does the water get from the well to the village, to the table, into other people's cups? It needs a vessel, and that vessel must be empty. But the self-help movement says, no, fill the vessel with what you want to drink, that makes you feel rich, that makes you successful, and then you go and fill all the cups with that nectar, with that alcohol, with that, intoxicating drink. That's how the Black Lodge spreads black magic. Because really, at the end of the day, what we've been talking about for this entire live stream, we've been talking about black magic, psychological manipulation by egos, for egos. We've been talking about mechanical nature taking control of God's creation. Mechanical nature controlling mechanical nature. What about God being the driver, controller, and creator and co-creator of creation? This is what the self-help movement won't tell you, either because they're avoiding it, concealing it, or because they're useful idiots don't know. Because all of these so-called gurus, they all have that longing to teach. They all have that longing to serve. They all have that longing to help. And the Black Lodge has exploited them, has taken advantage of them to spread teachings of black magic, teachings of how to hack the universe, of how to become a living, breathing, three-dimensional adversary to God's will, and or exploit God's will and God's creativity. Because there's lots of actors and musicians and artists and so on who have been infected by, and the self-help thing has gotten them successful and famous, but are they really satisfied from an emotional, spiritual, deep perspective, from a higher self perspective? That's why a lot of those people end up in drugs and alcohol and family issues and all kinds of problems, because deep down they have a kind of self-loathing, because life is so unnerving for a servant who's not serving. And a true artist serves their innermost creator. A true artist is a conduit for the inspiration to flow through them onto the page, onto the canvas, into the film, onto the stage, etc., 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 etc. Does anybody have any questions? We're getting to the 3.5 hour mark, so I think it's probably best. Thank you, by the way, for your patience, for getting through this material, and also for dealing with the sound, the terrible sound quality coming from my microphone. Also, thank you for your patience with some of the interruptions and some of the glitches, technical and otherwise, that we're going down today. It's just one of those days. Sometimes we just have one of those days where Murphy's Law comes along and says, "Oh, you want to do something different? You want to do something special, do you? Oh, okay. Well, let me show you what I think about that." "Oh, you want everything to go without a hitch? Let me show you what I think about that idea." So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your participation. Stephen Rigo, by the way, thanks Jeanette Schwab for tagging him. So I hope you all got something valuable today, and that we were able to reveal the deeper layer, the deeper undercurrents involved in this so-called self-help and New Age superficial industry. And it's a huge industry. You all know this. You see one of Tony Robbinson's mega events, and there's like literally like 50, 60, 70,000 people in a stadium, and they've all paid hundreds of dollars to be there, and it just, the longing that people have to self-actualize is so strong. And let's be honest, these salesmen, whether they believe wholeheartedly and earnestly in their own products and their own teachings, their own guidance, and they really do believe in their heart of hearts that they're doing the right thing and that they're helping people, we want to give these people the benefit of the doubt. We don't want to think the worst of them. We don't want to think that they're all black magicians. No, they were just taught and mentored by others who were taught and mentored and fell for the Black Lodge. And the Black Lodge is ego. And egos are subtle, they're clever, they're insidious. We cannot underestimate them, and we cannot be so naive as to think that just because I know how to visualize, and I know how to control my emotions, and I know how to get control of my thoughts, and I can do all that to manifest money and success and power and comfort and security into my life, and that I can teach others how to do that. We mustn't be naive and think that because of all of that surface level, worldly level success, I am free of ego. Because even the guest speaker, the New Age, the self-help guru that we had today, John, admitted the fear is still there. He writes a book, the thoughts come, the fearful thoughts come. What if this? What if that? What if it fails? What if people don't read it? What if people don't buy it? What if the scientific community comes and denounces what I'm saying here, because I got the science wrong? What if? These are fantasies. This is the paranoia that the AI mind is capable of spitting out once the fear gets hold of it and starts putting in the prompts. Make him paranoid, make him anxious, make him worried. Show him the book not selling. Show him the book not being read. Show him the scientist denouncing the book and his credibility. Oh no. Who's really in control? Or what is really in control? It's worthwhile asking ourselves that question, meditating on it. Benjamin says, thank you for the amazing live stream. I learned so much and really appreciate the effort you put into exposing the truth about self-help, the false self helping itself. Yeah, helping itself and helping itself to the power, the resources, the powers, the abilities and capabilities of the true self. The false self helps itself to that. The egos want nothing more than to be able to hijack, right? And that's why people, especially in the new age, who want to awaken powers, and all those people running around, oh, I have clairvoyance. I can tell your future. I can see your future. I can see into this dimension. I can see into that dimension. I have this power and I have that power. I. Just send me a check and I will use my powers for you and your benefit. I will help you manifest what you want, and I will tell you what to do. I will tell you when to buy stocks in the stock market, because I can tell the future. I can predict this and I can predict that. I. You may have clairvoyance. You may have power. You may be able to see auras and so on and so forth. But those powers, you have access to them because they belong to your innermost. But if you believe that they're your powers, and you're entitled to them, and you're entitled to use them however you wish, and you're entitled to make money with them, you need to ask yourself, is that the false self helping itself? False self helping itself to the powers and abilities of the true self for its own selfish, materialistic, worldly concerns. Right? Self-help. It's the term itself is loaded. It deserves unpacking, and I hope that our efforts today have helped unpack it for you. Any more questions or comments before we sign off? I'll take that as a no. So thank you all again for choosing to spend part of your Sunday afternoon or your Sunday evening here with me and all of us. Have a wonderful week, and hopefully I will see you again next week. In the meantime, as always, I want to wish you from the bottom of my heart inventual peace. Take care, everyone.